Tonight, tragic accident. A young boy dies south of Taylor. Police presence. A threat of a gun at the Dawson Creek exhibition in Stampede. And fully operational. The last generator at Site C is now online. Good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with tragic news south of Taylor. Sources telling CJDC-TV News that a 6-year-old boy has died in an all-terrain vehicle accident this weekend. It happened on Sunday. Now, sources say the boy died after falling off the ATV, and he wasn't wearing a helmet at the time of the accident. The BC Coroner Service confirming the death, but not releasing any information. They would only tell us their investigation into the death continues. There was an increase in police presence at this year's Dawson Creek exhibition in Stampede. That's because Mounties saying a teenager threatened to bring a gun to the fairgrounds last Wednesday. Well, he was located in Grand Prairie and questioned by police. Investigators saying the youth claimed that he was just trying to act tough and impress a girl. No charges were laid in the matter. The police also saying there were more fights than usual at the Stampede this year. However, no one was seriously injured. But according to organizers, it was another successful edition of the Dawson Creek Stampede this year.
I'd like to thank the whole community for making this year's fair exhibition, the Stampede, a great success.
Pratt says the attendance numbers were slightly below last year. He says they expect to break even this year. Planning for next year has already begun. Pratt says that includes new packages for sale and entertainment options, but he wouldn't elaborate as to what. The Dollar Tree in Fort St. John is facing a hefty fine by WorkSafe BC for a series of high-risk violations. The fines add up to over $129,000. WorkSafe BC says they observed many health and safety deficiencies at the store in Fort St. John. Dollar Tree failed to ensure material and equipment was stacked on storage racks in a stable and secure manner. And in addition, the storage capacity of the racks was not clearly posted, and the firm failed to perform a violence risk assessment. Dollar Tree was also fined for repeated violations. They failed to provide workers with proper information, training, and supervision to ensure their safety. The firm did not have an up-to-date written first aid procedures and could not ensure safe work conditions around electrical equipment. Speaking of electrical equipment, the Site C dam near Fort St. John is now fully operational, that according to BC Hydro. The dam is now able to generate 1,100 megawatts of electricity. That's enough to power 500,000 homes per year. The province says the development means that generations will benefit from affordable clean energy. With a final price tag of $16 billion, nearly double its initial cost, the dam is BC's most expensive infrastructure project ever. The province adds, Site C won't be the last major energy project. Well, there's more bad news for the BC forestry sector. There's reaction tonight to the Trump administration's decision to more than double penalties on softwood lumber imports. Now, officials here in BC say the move doesn't just hurt the forest industry, but it'll drive up construction costs for Americans. CTV Abigail Beeman has the details.
We've sent our student workers home a month early for the summer. And we're going to, we quite honestly, we're going to try to keep our mill, which employs 25 people in Chilliwack, going.
Andy Riley says things are urgent for his business and the entire softwood lumber industry. The trade war and the new Department of Commerce decision to raise tariffs, which along with counter-dumping duties totaled just over 35%, adds up to the most challenging time he's seen in 40 years.
We have to put that duty onto our sale price. And what happens to our customers is sometimes their sales slow down and their customers will start substituting for composite products or other hardwoods or other softwoods, whatever. But we are in danger of pricing Western red cedar completely out of the market.
BC's Minister of Forests called the U.S. move absurd and reckless, while the federal Natural Resources Minister said the industry has for too long been subject to unfair trade actions and the tariffs hurt Canadians and Americans alike. The U.S. decision comes after the Prime Minister promised supports, including $700 million in loans and $500 million to support market diversification.
Canada does not dump lumber into the United States, and we will continue to make the case that these current and proposed duties are unjustified.
The industry largely welcomed Ottawa's move, but Andy Riley says his group is working on pitching some other ideas to the feds. They're looking for help to pay the difference in duties between their raw materials cost and the sale price, which is what's so crippling about the new tariffs. Abigail Beeman, CTV News, Ottawa.
A man has been rescued after being lost in the BC wilderness for nearly 2 weeks. Officials say the man was last seen July 28th in the Castle Rock area near Quesnel. Crews say he drove up a forest access road and then he got lost, but after days of searching trails, a rescue helicopter finally spotted him and a glimpse of the man's truck. He was later found in a nearby clearing where he had written "help" on a big rock. Officials say he survived by drinking pond water and used grass in order to keep warm. The BC Centre for Disease Control is reporting 14 new cases of the measles since last Thursday, and has been the case for most of the year. The Northern Health Region once again leading the way. There's been 12 new cases here in northern BC, while the other 2 cases are from the interior. The total number of cases in the province has now increased to 174, with 6 of those being active, all 6 active cases in Northern Health Region. Officials continue to say that immunization is the best way to fight the highly contagious disease or virus. Starting today, Albertans can pre-order their fall COVID-19 vaccines, but most will have to pay for the vaccine. The province hasn't said how much it'll cost. Back in June, the Danielle Smith government announced it was reducing eligibility for COVID vaccines. It says more than 1 million doses were wasted last year. That's more than 50% of the entire supply for Alberta. The new vaccine program will roll out in 4 phases. The first 2 phases are reserved for seniors and those with underlying medical conditions. Critics are saying the new plan gives the false impression that COVID-19 vaccines are no longer needed. This year's wildfire season is the 2nd worst on record in Canada, and that's renewing calls for a national fire agency.
There's just too many fires, there's not enough resources. We call on help from around the world and from the Canadian Armed Forces, but we should be able to handle this on our own.
The Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre is currently playing a critical role in coordinating resources between provinces, but many people say there needs to be more resources to deploy during a surge in wildfires. The federal government says work is underway to improve Canada's wildfire response capacity, and that includes better coordinations across jurisdictions. And there are currently a dozen wildfires burning in New Brunswick. Premier Susan Holt is asking residents there to minimize the risk to those battling the blazes by staying out of the woods. But it's not going over very well. CTV's Judy Trin now on the resistance and the cries of government overreach.
Much of Atlantic Canada is a tinderbox, and on Sunday, New Brunswick banned traveling through the woods on Crown territory.
Sad, but it's the wise thing to do.
New Brunswick is the 2nd province to do so.
We're telling Nova Scotians, stay out of the woods.
Less than a week after it was in place, there are plans to challenge Nova Scotia's ban.
This is not the woods. This is the Department of Natural Resources.
Nova Scotia resident Jeff Evely deliberately broke the law in protest. He told provincial forestry officers that he was going to walk through the woods. Despite warnings to stop, the Afghanistan veteran ventured into the brush. That led to a $28,000 ticket, which Evely says violates his constitutional rights.
It needs to be minimally impairing and logically connected to the goal. And so my sneakers do not give off sparks when I'm walking in the woods or in the grasslands.
So far, 6 people have been ticketed for violating Nova Scotia's ban. The Ministry of Natural Resources says the hot, dry conditions are similar to 2023, when out-of-control fires forced 16,000 residents to flee.
It's so dry right now with people in the more people that are in the woods, the more likelihood we're going to have a fire. Because in Nova Scotia, almost all fires are started by human activity.
New Brunswick's premier directly addressed the frustration.
It's not that you might cause a fire. It's that if you're out there walking in the woods and you break your leg, we're not going to come and get you, because we have emergency responders that are out focused on a fire that is threatening the lives of New Brunswickers.
In Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland, people can still venture into the forest, but if they violate the fire ban, they face fines of at least $50,000, and in Newfoundland, they could face a potential jail sentence of 1 year.
A new poll suggests a growing number of Canadians support the approval of major national infrastructure projects. That's even in the face of opposition from provinces, Indigenous communities, and concerns about the environment. CTV's Abigail Beeman reports.
We are more than an obligation to be satisfied than swept aside.
You want to work together? Then let's really work together.
The First Nations Major Projects Coalition wants to bust the myth that Indigenous people oppose development.
There has to be a shift in seeing Indigenous people not as a risk, but as an opportunity to de-risk projects, to ensure that investors will invest in Canada and those projects, and that we can get to market on time.
New research from Nanos for CTV shows 70% of Canadians support or somewhat support national infrastructure projects, even if Indigenous nations are opposed. And more than half of Canadians, 59%, oppose or somewhat oppose Indigenous nations having the power to block infrastructure projects.
I think what it shows is that there's a lack of understanding writ large across the country of the role Indigenous people play in the national economy.
I think this speaks to a situation where there is political license, but that doesn't mean it's the best path forward.
It's a similar story for provincial pushback. 77% of Canadians support or somewhat support national infrastructure projects despite provincial opposition.
If the federal government were to try and move on developing infrastructure projects and steamroll the interests of provinces and Indigenous groups, then we're going to get tangled up in lawsuits every which way.
And as Manitoba eyes potential oil shipment through Hudson Bay, 60% of Canadians support or somewhat support developing Arctic land as an oil and gas route, even if there are environmental concerns.
There's a whole new appetite to move forward that never really existed to this level because of Donald Trump.
Numbers that support this promise from the Prime Minister.
Build, baby, build.
Who has made listening summits with Indigenous groups a priority this summer. The Conservatives promising a motion this fall calling for shovels in the ground on major projects by March, the one-year anniversary of Mark Carney taking office, while Carney has said his Major Projects Office and Indigenous Advisory Council will be up and running by Labor Day.
And Prime Minister Carney speaking with Ukraine's president by the phone today. It comes as world leaders seek to coordinate their response to an upcoming meeting between the United States and Russia. On X, Volodymyr Zelensky said, quote, he's grateful for Canada's support. Zelensky informed Carney about ongoing diplomatic efforts and discussions with other allies. The president says they both agreed that there can be no decisions without security guarantees, Zelensky adding that Russia's not seriously considering an end to the war. Carney's office said that he and Zelensky welcomed the leadership of Donald Trump in working towards peace, but they both insisted decisions on the future of Ukraine must be made by Ukrainians and not Americans. Trump is meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska this Friday. And Donald Trump is placing the U.S. Capitol under federal control. He's deployed the National Guard, sidelining local police in Washington, D.C. As CTV's Mike LeCouture reports, Trump was also asked about that meeting with Russia's president later this week.
Today's press conference was all about President Trump flexing his muscle, saying that only he can clean up the U.S. Capitol, and adding that no one else can broker a deal to end the war between Russia and Ukraine.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor.
The U.S. president describing it as Liberation Day in D.C. In a bid to crack down on crime, Trump is placing Washington under federal control while also deploying the National Guard.
But now they are allowed to do whatever the hell they want.
On the streets of D.C., protesters pushed back on the idea that the Capitol isn't safe. And Mayor Muriel Bowser said violent crime is at its lowest level in more than 3 decades.
If they can place us under military control without our consent, they will carry this playbook to every community that dares to push back in the United States of America.
While using his authority on the Capitol, President Trump was asked how he'll push Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday in Alaska, in what Trump is describing as a feel-out meeting.
Russia's occupied a big portion of Ukraine. They've occupied some very prime territory. We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine.
Trump also used the term land swap, indicating that Ukraine could also have to give up some territory. Ukraine's president is not invited to the talks and in his nightly address cast doubt that Friday's meeting will bring peace.
На що розраховує Путін і до чого реально готується?
Volodymyr Zelensky said Putin is not getting ready for peace, but instead is getting ready for a new military offensive. Zelensky also spoke to Prime Minister Mark Carney today, where the two leaders agreed international borders cannot be changed by force and that any decision on Ukraine's future should be made by Ukrainians. Mike Lecouteur, CTV News, Ottawa.
All right, please do stay tuned. Noah will be right back with weather.